What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another solo wrestling recap with your boy Brandon Tanguma. I am here to cover AEW's All Out. We're doing this live simulcast. Well, not live because this is just a pre-recorded podcast like it normally is, but we are doing this for Under the Radar for the Bulletcast, and Brandon babbles on about wrestling by himself on Curveballs and Cherry Shots, so you don't have a pithy name for it over there. But let's start off a little peek behind the curtain. I did not watch either wrestling show live. I was doing some stuff in the afternoon since All Out started at 12 noon. I was doing some chores. Then I did the Curveballs and Chair Shots episode. If you haven't, go check it out. Dominic and I do our usual shenanigans, go through the NFL, MLB, and everything in between. So go check that out after this if you have not yet. Then went to go pick up dinner, and it was already 4 o'clock, and WrestlePalooza started. So I was like, you know what, screw this. I guess I'll watch WrestlePalooza over on Netflix. Use my VPN since I don't got the ESPN Unlimited or whatever the official name of it is. And I watched the first match, and then they went to like a 4-minute break, and I was like, all right, fuck this. I'm not gonna wait here forever. So I said I'm going to AEW. I'm just gonna watch it. Watched it on the Thriller TV app, Triller TV. Also using the VPN. Bought it for $25 instead of the $50 or $40 if you did the discounted HBO Max deal. So still saving a little bit there with the VPN. So shout out if you're a wrestling fan. Highly recommend it. No matter, I use NordVPN. If you want to use other VPNs out there, go. Pretend like you live in the UK. Pretend like you live in Canada. And it'll save you immense amount of money by using the VPN compared to doing all this other stuff you got to do to watch wrestling now in the year 2025. But we're here. And let's start off with All Out 2025. This one took place in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, from the Scotiabank Arena, which is the NHL NBA arena. No word on the attendance. I didn't see what WrestleTix had it at, but they seem to have a pretty sizable crowd on hand. Definitely probably up above 10,000. And the pay-per-view proper started off with a tag team match. Copeland and Christian taking on FTR, Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler. Before the match, they showed Copeland and Christian backstage, and they ran into a Toronto Maple Leafs legend, and then they ran into Bubbles, and then they ran into the Green Bastard. If you haven't seen Trailer Park Boys, it's just Bubbles, the character, the actor, in a big old green gimmick, and, little Edge and Christian comedy before the match. So it was a strange way to kick off the show, but it was kind of entertaining and kind of fun nonetheless. As you would expect, Copeland and Cage got really good reactions being in Toronto, and, they go back and forth. Things that's been making the round for the most part in this match was Copeland doing his little tribute to John Cena, doing the 5-knuckle shuffle. They did not outwardly say, the commentators that is, say that John Cena's name. Bryan Danielson just said that he was paying an homage to a longtime rival. And we had a Cena chant in AEW, which I don't think I ever would have expected that to ever happen, but here we are. Then Stokely got involved, and Beth Copeland made her debut, I believe, in AEW. I don't think we've ever seen her before, at least kind of, over the barricade. Maybe she's been at some AEW shows before they showed her on camera, but she got physical with Stokely. She carted him out, so he was canceled out. Then after the fact, FTR was getting one up on Copeland. They hit him with 2 Shatter Machines, I think, and then Copeland kind of drooped in the corner. He hit a spear out of nowhere. Cage was holding on to, I believe, Cash. So then Copeland pinned Dax for the win in 18 minutes and 5 seconds. I thought it was a solid opener. Crowd was definitely into it. I thought the finishing sequence was kind of weird. It was a little anticlimactic that they just kind of put so much heat on Copeland, and then just out of nowhere, he just kind of, it wasn't even like a climactic spear to win. He just kind of was, as I said, in the corner, just kind of slumped over, ran up, hit a spear, pinned him, and that was pretty much it. The finishing sequence was a little awkward and could have been done a little bit better, but they got the job done. Then We had Mother Wayne, Nick Wayne, and Kip Sabian come out. Kip Sabian attacked or handcuffed Adam Copeland to the bottom rope. FTR pile drove Christian. Then they pile drove Beth Phoenix. So clearly the Copeland Cage FTR feud will continue. Maybe they veer off and take care of the Waynes, the family, whatever they're going by in the near future. So it seems as though we're gonna see more of the FTR Copeland Cage dynamic, and I'm not mad at it. Should be a fun little feud, fun stuff. Then we had Big Bill taking on a returning Eddie Kingston in a regular straight up singles match. This one went 7 minutes 20 seconds. You guys know I love me some Eddie Kingston, and it was definitely a up and down showing from my boy. He showed up looking fine, I guess. I mean, Kingston's not exactly a body, doesn't have the body of a god by any means. So, he looked fine. He looked pretty similar to what he looked pre-injury. And they didn't really do too much. Just kind of strikes back and forth, Kingston selling for Big Bill, then Kingston making his comeback, doing some strikes and, spinning back fists and stuff. Unfortunately, they did kind of botch the finish with a spinning back fist kind of out of nowhere, and Eddie Kingston completely missed Big Bill, and they didn't run it back. They didn't show a replay of it, and that was it. So, yeah, Eddie Kingston's back. Like I said, definitely was not the perfect return for Kingston, but, coming back 16 months, major knee, major leg injury. It's going to be a long road back, and hopefully he could, get his sea legs under him, and he can kind of get back the momentum that he had right before he was able to leave. After the match, Big Bill and Brian Keith attacked Kingston, and then Hook came out. You would think he made the save. I thought possibly it was going to be all a Swerve Bro, and Hook was going to join up with Big Bill and Brian Keith because he was talking about how he might need a new crew now that he's not with the Ops anymore. So it would seem, Brian Keith and Big Bill, no Chris Jericho anymore. It's seemingly so. And no, he ducks a Big Bill kick, puts Brian Keith in the Red Rum, and gets rid of them. And he embraces Eddie Kingston. So it looks as though at the beginning, this is the beginning of an Eddie Kingston Hook tag team, maybe a little faction with him and maybe some other people, maybe some other New Yorkers. Who knows what will come of that. But, a big Eddie Kingston Hook dynamic seems like a good pairing. As I said, maybe gets Eddie Kingston some reps, can get Hook some reps. I mean, they keep talking about Hook being kind of this young phenom, but he's already been in the company for like 4 or 5 years now at this point. So it's kind of time to shit or grit off the pot, I think, with Hook in terms of continuing to give him relevant television time. So we'll have to wait and see on that front. Then we had Mark Briscoe and MJF in a tables and tacks match. This one went 19 minutes and 20 seconds. I thought the match itself was pretty good for what it was, but I thought the psychology of the match and kind of the timing of the match could have been much better. I think this feud overstood its welcome a little bit. I think maybe last month would have been the time to kind of have this blow-off feud because, spoiler alert, Mark Briscoe did beat MJF pretty clean. Clean as you can get in this hardcore style match. And I think, this feud was pretty hot like a month or two ago, and they had a few matches, but MJF just kept beating Briscoe. And we got to this match, and people, like booing MJF. They kind of get behind Mark Briscoe, but it wasn't, I think, as hot as its peak was last month, and maybe they should have done this match last month and they didn't, or at least have the happy ending of Briscoe getting the win. And then also from the match itself psychology perspective, I thought it's a tables and tacks match, so there's going to be a lot of tables and thumbtacks, but the point of thumbtacks is kind of like a big spot at the end of a match, and you conclude with it. They kind of blew their load very early with the thumbtacks. Mark Briscoe grabbed 2 big old buckets and just dumped them in the middle of the ring. So the entire match, there were all these thumbtacks kind of scattered throughout. And, it's a fun moment to kind of tease getting thrown in the thumbtacks. And then finally the big heel or the baby face gets thrown into the thumbtacks at the end of the match. And that's kind of like the culmination, and they rally back, or, the heel sells it and they get pinned in it. But no, they Briscoe gets put in the thumbtacks probably within like the first 5 to 8 minutes of the match, and then he gets heat put on him from MJF. Then MJF gets put in the thumbtacks, and they go back and forth. And I understand that's kind of like the point of the match. It's about tables and thumbtacks. It was definitely more of a thumbtacks match than a tables match, but I thought maybe you could have held off on the thumbtacks a little bit, and maybe wait for like the last 10 minutes to really go all in. Or all out, one might say, with the thumbtacks on that front. But that being said, match was good. Nice to see that Briscoe just, no shenanigans, no chicanery, just went in there, had a solid match with MJF, and just beat him clean. So good for Briscoe. Seems as though this isn't like an elevation of Briscoe. He's going to seem to go right back to where he was in the mid-card. They cut a promo later on that they're going to have a six-way tag match or a six-person tag match with the conglomeration taking on the Don Callis family. And it is going to be the return of Orange Cassidy. So Mark Briscoe, Orange Cassidy, and Kyle O'Reilly, I believe, going to be in a tag match against the Don Callis family. So despite beating MJF, looks like Briscoe's just kind of going to go right back to the mid-card. Probably kind of where he belongs in AEW, to be honest. Then we had a trios match, The Demand, which is Ricochet, Bishop Khan, and Toa Leona, if you didn't know that was their name now. They took on the Hurt Syndicate, Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, and MVP. This one went 13 minutes, 45 seconds. Completely fine trios match. This one is definitely on the chopping block if we're looking to cut some matches. This could have been on a Dynamite, could have been on a Collision, but it was here on the pay-per-view. MJF took the pin, as you would suspect, but he didn't wrestle kind of like a manager. He just wrestled like an old veteran wrestler, which is fine. But, kind of goes along with the reputation, I would say, of the Hurt Syndicate. So, I guess it's good that the Hurt Syndicate kind of lost and did a job here, but, the crowd was behind Hurt Syndicate, definitely, with this being a heel match. Kind of, I guess. I still do not understand how we are supposed to feel about the Hurt Syndicate. It has been just all over the place in the past few months, and, I don't see this feud going any further. Maybe they'll ditch MVP and it'll just be Bobby and Shelton taking on, Bishop Khan and Toa Leona. Toa Leona, easy for me to say. And, that'll be its own little separate feud, but yeah, I don't know. Then we got the TBS title match with Mercedes Moné defending against Riho. And I think this is kind of like where the show itself picked up. This is kind of the second half of the show, and this one went 16 minutes, and Mercedes Moné retained and beat Riho to get back her TBS title. I thought this was a really good match, which you'd expect, kind of on the lower end, I would say, of Mercedes Moné matches, but it was good. They did point out on commentary that for the first time, Moné didn't have the speed advantage because Riho, no Jim Ross on the call this week on the show, but they definitely put over how small and tiny Riho is, which, I understand, but we can go with, we can see a Riho match and not have to go over how tiny she is. She can still be a wrestler. She can, hold her own. She's the first ever AEW Women's Champion. Show some respect to poor little Riho. But yeah, Mercedes Moné got the win. Solid match, what you'd expect. Bryan Danielson did point out that Mercedes is looking to beat Ultimo Dragon's 10 belt record. Currently, she's at 9. Moné did come out with a bunch of shirtless guys just on the ramp wearing all of her titles. And currently, she has 9 belts. So do any independent wrestling shows out there, I would assume Mercedes Moné's booking calendar is open, and she is looking to take 2 more independent championships that no one's ever heard of, so she can say she is better than Ultimo Dragon. There you go. Then we get the AEW Unified Championship, which is Kazuchika Okada defended against Konosuke Takeshita and Mascara Dorada. This one was really good. I maybe say second best match of the night. Mascara Dorada, very underrated. He's just kind of, doing his own thing on Collision, having some matches, winning a lot of matches, and that's why he was kind of put in this match. And, as we all know how talented Takeshita and Okada can be, and both of them kind of showed out, obviously Okada, a little bit of a step back compared to what he's done in the past, but Takeshita brought it. I thought Dorada brought it, and Okada was in there doing his stuff as good as he can in 2025 in AEW. And it was just a good old time. But at the end of the day, what you'd expect, Okada pinned Dorada to retain. So, good action for the majority of it, but the finish was kind of never in doubt. You thought maybe Takeshita would beat Dorada, but no, it was always going to be Okada defeating Dorada. And this obviously sets up a singles match between Okada and Takeshita, but it just kind of is a question mark of where and when. Takeshita does have his IWGP title match against Zack Sabre Jr. coming up relatively soon in October. Wrestle Dream is going to be taking place in October in St. Louis. And politically, I don't know what AEW and New Japan want to do with Takeshita, because if New Japan is going to have him be the champion, does that mean they're going to take a lot of dates from him compared to his AEW time? Is AEW going to want to have him, is New Japan not going to want to have him lose? Is New Japan going to want to have him protected? I don't, it seems as though we're going to get Okada and Takeshita eventually. And I would think it would be Takeshita beating Okada. So like that politically point, I don't see being an issue in terms of, New Japan blocking Takeshita from losing, because I think the plan is going to be Takeshita beating Okada at the end of the day. But it just, timing-wise, where does all this go down? Because you have Wrestle Dream going in on October next month. But as I said, Takeshita has his IWGP title match. Is he going to win? Is he going to lose? And then we also have the Continental Classic tournament coming up at the end of the year. So maybe they save it all the way till then, which would be World's End at the end of December, I believe. But then that's also Wrestle Kingdom time. So, that's another kind of thing of maybe they do this match at World's End. Maybe they do this match at Wrestle Kingdom. I don't know. So definitely up in the air what exactly Okada and Takeshita, where the storyline, where this feud is going to end up. Then we got a coffin match between Darby Allin and Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley made his usual entrance, and Darby Allin cut him off and met him in the crowd. They brawled for a little bit before finally making their way over to the ringside area. They had two coffins kind of gimmicked up, one being a Jon Moxley coffin, one being a Darby Allin coffin. The Jon Moxley coffin was kind of used throughout the match. Darby did a suicide dive into the coffin. Both Darby and Jon Moxley had their fingers smashed by this coffin. So just what you'd expect. Darby did go and bite Jon Moxley's ear. So Moxley's ear / side of his head was bleeding. I thought it was just good, solid action. There was some gory aspects. There was some, over the top, physicality that you would expect from this, but they didn't go too over the top, which I was a little bit scared of. But then, seeing the finish and seeing the match itself, it made some sense because Moxley sent the Death Riders to the back, but not all of them, because we had the return of Pac. So Pac came back. Bars. He has a haircut. He still has some longer hair, but it's not as long as he used to be. And Pac was in street clothes, and it was always weird because he would always just be in his trunks, no shirt. So to see him with shirts and pants on was kind of a sight to behold. So Pac took Darby and he hit him with a razor's edge from the ring to the outside, and Darby landed on top of one of the closed caskets, and then put him back in the ring. Moxley put Darby in a body bag, hit him, tossed him in the coffin, slammed the coffin, bam, wins the match. So clearly this is not the end of the feud, which is probably why they didn't go as hard as they could have. Now, that being said, they still did, some pretty gruesome stuff. They did some pretty, a lot of physicality and, what you would expect probably on the medium to low end between these two guys. So it continues to make me scared when they're going to have that kind of big spectacle blow-off match, whenever the case may be. But I thought it was a good match for what it was. It was, maybe a little bit of a letdown, just because the finish was definitely a cop-out. It adds, Pac is super talented, happy to see him back. But this continues the Death Rider storyline saga. How long is this going to end? Will it end with Darby? Will they continue on if and when Darby beats Moxley? I don't know, but we're just going to have to wait and see on that front. They did do another segment later on in the show where Darby John Moxley was talking to the camera, he sent the Death Riders off. They, drove away in their little pickup truck, and then for whatever reason, Moxley stayed behind and then was yelling at the cameraman to stay away because he was going to do something to Darby, I guess, in the coffin. And this was like an hour and a half after the match was over. And so presumably Darby was just still lifeless in the coffin, I guess. I don't know. But luckily he wasn't, because Moxley opened the casket or coffin, and Darby attacked him with a steel pipe, and then he put Moxley in the body bag and then was going to hit him with the steel pipe, apparently kill him. But then he thought better of it. And also during the match, we had the plastic bag spot. So that is back. We had a chant of "This is murder." Bryan Danielson was on commentary the entire night, and he was pretty good, I would say, for the most part. I thought, he had some awkward moments like he normally does, but he did get somewhat involved by giving a bag to Darby, but it was a bag inside of a bag, which was kind of weird. I don't know why you needed a full-blown duffel bag just to put a plastic bag inside, but I digress. So we did get that spot return to AEW. Whoopee. Can't wait to see that again. But then we even topped that, because then, as I said, later on in the show, Darby put Moxley in a body bag, and then he took some lighter fluid, I would assume, put it on the body bag, then took a lighter and lit it on fire. So Moxley the body bag was set on fire, and immediately someone came with a fire extinguisher, and then they carried Darby away. So this feud is far from over, and we had another stunt spot with fire. We had more attempted murder on AEW. Fantastic. Then we had the 4-way women's match between Timeless Toni Storm defending her title against Jamie Hayter, Kris Statlander, and Tekla. This one only went 11 minutes, 55 seconds, pretty short and sweet, but Kris Statlander ended up getting the win, surprisingly pinning Toni Storm. So no cop-out, no pinning of the non-champion. She pins Toni Storm with the seatbelt roll-up pin to get the win, and Storm was shocked, as everybody else was, and Statlander gets the win. Very surprising, clearly, that Statlander got this win. I don't understand it right off the rip, why they would just not have this be a straight-up one-on-one match of Statlander and Storm, and you can do the exact same finish of Statlander, hitting the seatbelt roll-up for the win. I don't know why you needed Jamie Hayter and Tekla in the match. They have their own little feud going on, so they could, have either a match on the show or have a match, have their own feud off to the side and just do Kris Statlander and Toni Storm. Because for the most part, this feud, wasn't anything special by any means. This just kind of seemed like a filler match to kind of get the women on the show and fill some time. They've been doing kind of the side angle of the Death Riders recruiting Kris Statlander, but Statlander, not Scatlander. That's a completely different thing. Statlander has been kind of rejecting it, or at least, not really showing her emotion towards it. We did get Wheeler Yuta right before the match talking to Statlander about something. Statlander didn't seem too impressed or, too inspired by whatever Wheeler Yuta was saying. But maybe he said to use the seatbelt, and it ended up winning. So the action itself, as I said, only went 12 minutes, so it wasn't super intense and anything super crazy by any means. Just kind of every woman gets their spots in, pretty fast paced. Women's pairing off and doing their own stuff. I guess this means we're gonna get a Statlander Storm feud going forward. Maybe this is kind of the evolution of the Statlander heel turn. I think Statlander is talented, and they kept hammering the point home that she hasn't had a title match in 4 years. But she's just been kind of hampered by injuries, back and forth turns, and just kind of inconsistent character work, because she was the alien. She was kind of like the awkward alien with Orange Cassidy at first. And then she turned she got injured, came back, turned heel with Stokely, and then now she's back to being a babyface, but then now it looks as though she's going to turn heel with the Death Riders. She's not an alien anymore. She's kind of just like an adult, just a regular, straightforward adult woman wrestler with not really a gimmick. So I don't know what the vision is here with Kris Statlander winning. Maybe this was just a simple fact of there was no title changes on this card at all. And they looked back and they said, you know what? I guess we'll just have Statlander winning. If you listen to my Bulletcast prediction, I predicted every single title to be retained, and then I went back, I was like, oh, there's no title changes, so if I have to pick one to lose, I guess I'd pick Toni Storm. So maybe they had the same thought process as I did. I don't know, but like I always say in these, we have to wait and see where they go from here. Then we had another four-way match, but this was a ladder match for the Tag Team Championship as Brodito defended against the Young Bucks, Jet Speed, and the Don Callis family. And this one went 24 minutes and 40 seconds, and exactly what you'd expect, just kind of a spectacle spot fest, flippy-doos galore. And it was a lot of fun while it lasted, and Brodito climbed their way up and got the win. Not kind of hard to kind of go down and break everything spot by spot, but, the guys that you would expect to do flippy-doos like, Nick Jackson, Speedball Mike Bailey, Bandito did some stuff, even Brody King got involved, did some high-flying stuff. Hechicero got a showcase from here and there. So hopefully everybody is healthy and did not get hurt in this match, but it was a good time while it lasted. Then, after the fact, the Young Bucks were still in the ring, and then we got the return of Jack Perry. And then the Young Bucks were beating down on Jack Perry, and he smiled, and then we cut to black, and then we got this big old vignette about Jack Perry digging somebody up from the grave, and he resuscitated Luchasaurus back to life. Too bad we saw Luchasaurus last month at Forbidden Door wrestling against Copeland and Cage, because Nick Wayne broke his foot. I would assume that was definitely a kind of last minute call, and if Nick Wayne didn't legit break his foot, Luchasaurus would have made his return on this show. But Jack Perry and Luchasaurus are back together, and it is Luchasaurus, not Kill Switch, because he had the Kill Switch belt on him, and he looked down at it, ripped it off, threw it in the crowd. And then they played the old Jungle Boy theme song, so it definitely seems as though Jack Perry is a babyface, and him and Luchasaurus are back together, as the complete, as the CM Punk stan. It is kind of hard for me to get behind Jack Perry. I wonder how that is the case for a lot of AEW fans, but, in this moment, the crowd was very much into doing the Jungle Boy, wave your arms back and forth and sing the song. So we'll wait and see if the crowd takes to this kind of iteration of Jungle Boy. As I said, Kris Statlander grew up and stopped being alien and became more of an adult. Let's see how a babyface Jungle Boy, is not Jungle Boy anymore, but he's, a babyface Jack Perry as an adult. So, clearly looks as though we're going to get a Young Bucks, Luchasaurus, Jungle Boy feud going into that. Should be a good time. Should be a good feud. I wonder what Brodito does, with the tag titles going forward, because they're still a really solid tag team. I think individually they can be more, but as a tag team, they are doing just fine. Then, main event time, we had the AEW Men's World Championship. They definitely kind of put over the fact they kept saying the Men's World Championship, which I've always kind of didn't understand why people didn't do that more. It's like, we always call it the Women's World Championship. Why don't we call it the Men's World Championship? All right. I'll get off my liberal equality soapbox here. But Hangman Adam Page defended against Kyle Fletcher. This one went 38 minutes and 10 seconds, and this was absolutely fantastic. Best match of the night, I think, by a mile. They kind of started off pretty slow to begin with, and you're like, okay, settle in, boys and girls. We're probably going to go for a long one, and they definitely did here. And I thought it dragged a little bit towards the beginning, but it definitely picked up in like the last 15 minutes. And what can I say? This was just a phenomenal match. I don't want to say like a star-making performance from Kyle Fletcher, because I think people kind of pegged him as being something special, and definitely he's on the come up, but we could maybe look back at this match and be like, all right, that was probably the first really like great match of Kyle Fletcher's career in AEW. and they definitely kind of put it over the fact. It was interesting that they, going into the match, they had the stipulation that nobody can get involved. The Don Callis family can't get involved. And I don't know what the reasoning behind that was. Maybe it was just to, set aside expectations, is just have the focus be on the two wrestlers in the ring. And if that was the case, I'm all for it. Less overbooked bullshit and just have these two guys go at it because they were talented enough to tell a fantastic story. That's exactly what they did. Just, a good, strong style match. Some variations of no selling and kicking out of finishers, but it definitely didn't go towards the absurd part that some of these AEW and frankly even WWE main event matches can go down. Both guys pulled out some finishers and some moves of their rivals. Hangman Page pulled out a V-trigger, tried to go for the one-winning angel, but Kyle Fletcher countered it. Hangman hit a big pressure, which is Swerve's move. Fletcher also hit a hidden blade elbow. He was trying to go for the Storm breaker, but Hangman countered out of that. So stealing other guys' moves to tell a story. I can't go move for move because it was a nearly 40-minute match, but if you only have time to watch one match, I definitely would recommend you watch this one. Great match, probably best thing of the show, best thing out of the two shows, I would say by a wide margin, and no shenanigans, no angle afterwards. Hangman just gets the win, selling, goes back up the ramp, goes to the babyface tunnel, and we fade to black, and that was that. So that was the All Out recap. Overall, I thought it was a really good show. Going into it, it was kind of on the lower end of AEW pay-per-views, especially the top-tier tentpole events like All Out is, but I thought the matches itself delivered. Time-wise, came in just at 5 hours, so it definitely bled into WrestlePalooza. I think that was to be expected, that it was going to bleed into WrestlePalooza, and it was a good show. If you got the funds to watch it, or if you got the ways to watch it, my nefarious means, I definitely would recommend you watch it. We give grades out here over on the Bulletcast, so if I'm going to give a grade, I would give All Out 2025 a B+. It had the absolutely fantastic match in the main event. As I said, kind of that last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 matches. Started with Mercedes and Riho, and they just kind of gradually built up from there. And even some of the other matches, I thought Copeland and Copeland, Cage, and FTR was pretty good. Briscoe and MJF for what it was good for what it was. So, nothing particularly bad on the show, but what was good was pretty good for the most part. I think AEW's in a pretty good spot right now. People might dunk on their viewerships and things, but I think they're heading in the right direction. We can kind of quip with maybe some of the idiosyncrasies of some of the booking and some of the television stuff on a weekly basis, but overall, AEW, I think, is kind of on the come up, and they definitely need to be building up new stars with Will Ospreay and Swerve out. It definitely kind of showcases that they have a lack of depth on the top tier babyface front. So maybe this was a way to kind of develop that with Kyle Fletcher. Looks as though maybe Takeshita is on that way as well. Kenny Omega is there, but he ain't no spring chicken. He can't be there every single week wrestling all the time, so trying to get someone to, try to build up some depth behind Hangman Page and Darby Allin right now, because kind of outside of those two guys, they don't really have anybody in the main event field in the babyface side in AEW, but that's a discussion for another day. So if you're here on the Bulletcast, that'll do it for me for today. Love you all. Big hugs, tiny kisses. Goodbye, good night, and bye-bye.
Reach for the sky, boy.